Hey guys, this is Mrs. Pack. Today I'm going to show you how to make a single crust pie that you can use for a breakfast quiche or a cream pie or any other pie where you just need one pie crust on the bottom of your pie pan. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use the food processor here instead of just doing it by hand. I know I showed you it before, how we use it using the pastry blender, but today we're gonna do it all in the food processor. So you're gonna be able to see how much easier it is and a little bit quicker it is to do it in the food processor. So if you have one, great. If not, you can still make it the same way we did in class, using a pastry blender or using two knives. So I'm gonna add into here my ingredients. Remember, there's 4 main ingredients in a pie crust. You've got all-purpose flour, and I've already pre-measured. We've got some salt, and I'm going to give that a quick blend first using my food processor. All right, after you get your salt and your flour blended slightly in the food processor, then you can go ahead and add your cold butter or shortening. So remember, I need a stick of butter here, and I'm going to just take these pieces. I've already cut them up, and I'm going to put them, spread them around in the food processor, and this is where using a food processor really saves a lot of time. So we'll scrape this off of here, put the lid back on, and this is where the pulse button is really going to make this easier. Okay, so we're just going to pulse a couple times. Remember, whenever we're using the pastry blender, this is when you'd be using it, you're going to blend until your ingredients or your fat looks like small peas. So I'm just going to pulse it slowly until it looks like I've got small peas in there. And for you guys at home or at school using your pastry blender, this step normally takes, a good 5 minutes or so. And right now it looks like I am right where I need to be. I've got my butter cut into the size of small peas. I'm happy with the way this looks. It looks like it's thoroughly blended. All right, so once we have all of our butter pulsed in and it looks like the size of small peas, we can start adding our water. So remember, I have a measuring cup here full of water that I added ice to. So we have nice ice cold water. And for this particular recipe, we need 2 to 4 tablespoons. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use the pulse button as I pour in each individual tablespoon. Make sure that when you do this, that you fill your tablespoon up all the way. And I'm gonna pulse as I add the water. So we're just going to add enough water until our flour starts to kind of hold together. Going nice and slow. If you don't have a food processor, this would be a good opportunity to use a fork to stir while you add your water. All right, so I have 4 in there. Let's see where we're at. See if it's going to come together. I probably could put a little bit more in there. It's a little bit dry still. Remember, it's kind of an eyeball thing. It depends on the weather, the moisture in the air, the moisture in your flour. So I probably will be good with this last one. There we go. And we can see it now starting to hold together a little bit more. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move some of these other ingredients to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and take my beater out of here so I can gather up my flour mixture. And I'm going to gather it into a ball. And if you remember, once we get it into a ball and we hold it together, we are going to want to flatten that ball into a disc. Okay? So we're going to pull this together. Remember, one of the keys to making pie crust is to not overmix. So that came together very nicely of a nice disc. And the best way to roll this out, again, is to roll it between 2 pieces of wax paper. All right, so I'm going to get my other piece of wax paper here. As you roll, remember to not roll off of your dough onto the countertop, because all that does is thin out the edges. I like to kind of rotate my wax paper as I roll. You can see how it's kind of curling there. That's okay. You can just flatten it out. As you're rolling, You can, if it seems like it's not rolling anymore, remember to loosen up that wax paper. And our goal here is to roll this out until we get to about 1 inch larger than the size of our pie pan. So I have my pie pan right here that we are going to use as our guide so we know how much to roll this out. And it seems like it's getting a little bit tough to roll, so I'm going to loosen one side. I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to do the other side. So if we take a minute and stop, let's take our pie pan and we'll see if we're big enough. So right now I'm about the size of my pie pan, but remember your dough has to go in the bottom, up the side, and over the lip. So I still need to keep going a little bit longer. Now if you want to make this at home, the recipe will be available in Canvas or on my webpage on the school's website. And you can try making this. The other entree pies we have in our pie recipe packet are a chicken dinner pie, which is similar to a chicken pot pie. And we have the South of the Border pie, which is kind of like a Tex-Mex pie. All of these pies are single crust pies. So if you would like to try what we're doing here, I think we're pretty close. Whatever I don't have big enough, I can piece together with some of my extra. So the next step then is to put your pie crust into your pie pan. And what I like to do is I like to lift up the edge and I like to just flip it over, and you can adjust it while it's still on the wax paper. It really makes adjusting it a little bit easier, getting it centered. So now I'm going to slowly pull my wax paper off. And in order for it to fit down in the pie pan, I'm going to lift up the edges and I'm going to let it fall down into the bottom of the pan and slowly come up the sides without stretching your pie crust. If you stretch and push that pie crust in there, when it bakes, it will shrink on you and it'll pull away and maybe tear a little bit. Okay? Because this is just a one crust pie crust, we don't have to wet the edges. I am going to patch up a couple little spots here where I don't hang over very far, because we do want a little bit of hangover, and I can use a little bit of water to patch in a little spot here just to make it hang over a little bit more. Again, inspect your edges, maybe a little bit over here too, so that areas where you have extra pie crust, use a little bit of water. It's going to work like glue to add in a little bit more that hangs over. Now I like to then take a knife and I like to just trim up the edge a little bit because we don't need all of that overhang. Some people like to go right up to the edge of the pie pan, but I like to have a little thicker crust, so we're going to fold the overhang underneath what's already there, and we're going to use that to help us flute the edges of the pie pan. Now, when we flute with a two crust pie, the purpose is to help hold the top and bottom pie crust together. In a one crust pie, really it's just for it to look nice. It doesn't really have a major purpose other than just giving you a little thicker pie crust. Remember too, when you're making your pie crust, you can use shortening or butter, but you want to make sure that you're using solid fat. You're not using a light butter or a light shortening, or you don't want to be using a margarine because that's not going to be enough fat in the crust. And it'll make your crust watery and probably soggy with all that extra water that's whipped into margarines and light butters. So make sure that you're using one of those. All right, so we've got our edges tucked under. Now we can do our fluting. Remember, there's 3 ways that we can flute. We can use a fork to do the edge. A lot of people like to use a fork. That's the way my mom always did it. So we could take a fork and press our edges like that. We can use our finger and press our edges like this. This is the one I normally do. And again, this is just kind of decorative. It helps make your pie look a little bit nicer. And then you could do the one where you pinch the dough between your thumb and index finger, and it gives it a different type of rippled look. Sometimes that turns out nicely for me, sometimes it doesn't. All right, so we are going to bake this pie shell raw with the filling. Now, if you were making a cream pie, like a chocolate cream pie, you would want to bake this first. So when you go to bake a pie crust first and just make a shell, you're gonna want to weigh down your pie crust so it doesn't bubble and get air pockets in it. So a couple ways you can do that is you can get a bunch of dried beans and then lay them on top. You could also take a fork and you could prick all the way around the edges and the bottom of your pie crust to let any air and steam kind of escape as it's baking in the oven without anything in it. Because the pie we're gonna bake in an unbaked pie crust, we're just gonna start adding the ingredients. So I already have those ready to go. So the recipe calls I'm gonna make a bacon quiche. So we are going to put 8 strips of bacon on the bottom, along with some onion, about 1/2 cup of onion, and then about 1 cup of cheese. Now I'm using American cheese here that I just chopped up, just because it's what I had on hand, but you can use cheddar or any other kind of cheese that you think your family would like or you would like. And then in my bowl here, I have, and before I add the mixture, we're gonna get this on a baking sheet because it's gonna be very runny, and as you carry this to the oven, it's very easy to spill. So we're gonna put it on this pie, this baking sheet, so it makes it easier to transfer it to the oven. So what I have in this mixture is 6 eggs beaten with 1.5 cups of half and half. If you don't have half and half, like I didn't have half and half today, but I had heavy whipping cream, so I used half heavy whipping cream, half milk, okay? So you can use that, and that way you're gonna get half and half still out of that. And then there's just some salt and pepper and a little bit of cayenne to spice it up a little bit, okay? So I'm just gonna give this one more whisk, and then I'm gonna pour this over top of my meat and my cheese and my onion. And we'll set that aside. And the last thing that we have to do before we put any of our pies in the oven is we need to put our foil color around the edge to protect your fluting and your edges from burning while you wait on the rest of the pie to bake. Okay, so just gently. A lot of times you guys will want to kind of press that hard into your crust. And then whenever I go to take it out, right before it's time to be done, when we have about 15 minutes left in baking, I end up ripping some of your crust off. I don't want to do that. So just lightly. This is going to go in the oven at 425 for a little while, and then I'm going to reduce the temperature to 300, and that's going to go in for about 45 minutes to an hour. If you have any questions, you can always message me or talk to me in school. And if you'd like to try making this, I would love to see your finished product when you're done trying to make either this one or any of our entree pies. So if you have any questions, make sure you let me know. All right, guys, have a good day.